Hi everyone, hope you're well and enjoying the conference. My name is Jaber Ahmad, and in this session, I'm going to talk about the CEFR as a tool for formative assessment with a particular focus on self and peer assessment. Right, so here's an overview of the session. First, I'm going to briefly describe Barry O'Sullivan's comprehensive learning system so that we can see the role of assessment in relation to other core elements of an education system. I'll also explain the role that frameworks or standards like the CEFR can play in such systems. I'll then move on to talk about formative assessment as well as self and peer assessment and their benefits before we move into the main section of the session, where I'll talk about using the CEFR to design tasks and their associated feedback forms. After that, I'll look at challenges and solutions around introducing self and peer assessment before concluding and sharing some resources. Right, so let's get started. So in 2020, Barry O'Sullivan published an article on the comprehensive learning system. And what you can see on the slide is a triangle which represents an education system, with each of the 3 points representing an element of the system. So firstly, you've got the curriculum, which includes any specific goals or objectives and course content. You've got delivery, which refers to the process of teaching the curriculum, and that includes the teaching methodology, teacher training, the physical environment, and the learning or teaching materials. And finally, you have assessment, which relates to assessing progress towards curriculum goals, formative assessment, as well as assessing what students have learned of the curriculum, summative assessment. Now, these three elements are of equal importance and must be aligned to a set of clearly defined standards for language proficiency for learning to be effective. So the three elements have to be in harmony and should all directly relate to the standards. If there's misalignment, the system will be under threat. Now, as Barry O'Sullivan has stated many times before, this is all quite obvious and logical, and the idea is certainly not new. But it's remarkable how much this basic concept of the alignment of the three elements is ignored or forgotten about. Okay, so moving on to the CFR now. Well, the CFR is an international standard for language proficiency. It's been used for things like evaluating learners' language needs and developing learning materials, syllabuses, and courses. It's also been used for developing continuous and self-assessment tools and tests and exams, also developing teacher training programs and developing government language policies. So where does the CFR fit in here? Well, it's a standard. So here, in many education systems, the CFR is used as the standard. So curriculum goals and objectives are developed based on CFR descriptors. And when teaching the curriculum, the objective is to teach towards those curriculum goals and objectives, which are aligned to the CFR. And finally, assessment relates to assessing progress and achievement of those CFR aligned curriculum objectives. Okay, so let's move on to formative assessment now. And here's a definition. I'll give you some time to read it. Okay, and now here are some tools for formative assessment. It's not an exhaustive list by any means. Lots of different ways of eliciting performance and assessing. And the particular tool or tools I'll be focusing on today are self and peer assessment. But firstly, we can look at formative assessment as a cycle. It's important to establish where the learner is. So learners need evidence of the current status of their learning by teacher, student, or peer. They need to know how good their work and learning is in relation to clear success criteria. They also need to know where they're going. Students need to know the learning goal, and this could be both for the whole class or on a more individual basis. And of course, they need to know how they can get there. They need to know how they can close the gap between where they are now and where they need or want to be. And of course, the CFR comes in here too. CFR descriptors from curriculum or learning objectives can be used as success criteria to measure and inform where the learner is, where they're going, and how they can get there. The CFR descriptors and levels make these targets concrete, promoting a sense of progress aligned to an internationally recognized standard of language proficiency. So let's move on to self and peer assessment now. So just so we're all on the same page, self-assessment refers to a student assessing their own performance in a communicative language task in relation to success criteria. And peer assessment refers to a student assessing the performance of another student in a communicative language task in relation to the success criteria. So let's look at some benefits of self-assessment now. Well, firstly, self-assessment enhances metacognition and self-regulated learning. This means that it improves learners' awareness and regulation of their learning process and strategies, and enables them to set goals, monitor them, and adjust strategies as they go along. And of course, this relates to the second benefit, which is that self-assessment promotes learner autonomy. This is because um, engaging in self-assessment encourages students to take responsibility for their own progress, and it reduces dependency on teachers for feedback and evaluation. Another benefit of self-assessment is that it increases motivation and confidence. So when learners notice their progress, this can help motivate them and improve their confidence. Self-assessment provides a sense of control over learning, making students more engaged with the learning process. Another benefit is that self-assessment is compatible with the CFR's overall approach. The CFR advocates for using self-assessment in language programs, and there's actually standard tools already available on the CFR's website, like the self-assessment grid. Okay, so moving on to peer assessment now. Um, Similarly to self-assessment, there are also metacognitive benefits. This is because students learn by assessing others. So having to understand the success criteria, assessing their peers, and articulating strengths and areas for improvement, this helps them learn through consolidating learning objectives, targets, good practice, pitfalls to avoid, and so on. The second benefit of peer assessment is that it can help with language and skills development as it increases student talking time while learners interact and give each other feedback. There's also evidence that learners can improve their own writing while transferring abilities they learn while reviewing their peers' texts. Another benefit of peer assessment is that it encourages collaboration and social learning. This is because, as already mentioned, peer work creates a student-centered classroom, fostering teamwork, cooperation, and productive discussions. Another benefit is that it provides immediate, plentiful, and varied feedback. This is because it enables students to receive multiple perspectives on their work, and feedback is often quicker than teacher feedback, promoting faster revisions and improvements. And this is, of course, particularly beneficial in larger classrooms. And finally, similar to self-assessment, the CFR also advocates for the use of peer assessment in language programs. Okay, so moving on to the next session, where I'll take you through a practical example of designing a CFR-aligned task and the associated feedback forms. So the CFR can help you to design language tasks for your students by targeting the abilities described in the CFR descriptors. The first step would be to select a CFR descriptor from your CFR-aligned curriculum or learning objectives. So if we look at the CFR descriptive scheme now, um, I'm interested in a descriptor under communicative language activities, production activities. Um, it's the overall production one, which I've highlighted there. And here's the scale from pre-A1 to C2. And the particular descriptor of interest for me is the B2 level descriptor for overall oral or spoken production. And here it is, so I've selected it. The next stage would be to analyze the descriptor. What are the key elements? So I'll give you a moment to read the descriptor. Okay, so now I've highlighted a lot of the elements there. And the next stage would be to establish what kinds of communicative tasks lend themselves to eliciting the ability described in the can-do statement. So in this case, a possible task type would be some kind of extended or sustained monologue where learners have to give descriptions or presentations on a particular topic. So of course, the next stage would be to decide what topic would be appropriate for your learners and how does it fit with your course content. Now, in this particular descriptor, you can see there's reference made to a wide range of subjects or topics. And elsewhere in the CFR, it makes reference to concrete and unfamiliar or abstract topics as being appropriate for B2 level learners. So if we turn to the British Council and Equals Core Inventory for General English, you'll find a list of appropriate topics for A1 to C1, grouped by level. But if you look at any quality published CEFR aligned coursebook, if you look across the units, you can see a more extensive list of topics like the list you can see on this slide now. This particular list here was given to me while I was on the British Council Global Assessments Item Writing for Language Assessment course. And if you're interested in becoming a test item writer for the British Council, writing test items for APTIS, Foundation English Test, etc., keep an eye out on the British Council English Assessment LinkedIn page, because there are recruitment exercises maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Anyway, the particular topic of interest for me here is education, training and learning. So that's the topic I've selected, and I'll need to target an abstract aspect of this topic. The next step would be to decide what language and strategies might support your learners in the completion of the task. Are you able to practice or recycle language from the course or lesson objectives? So let's look at an example to make this easier to understand. So let's imagine the context is an end of unit freer practice activity on the topic of education in a B2 level general English class at the British Council Madrid Adults Teaching Centre. The purpose of the task is to provide learners with an opportunity to develop their spoken production skills, drawing on the vocabulary, cohesive devices, and compensatory strategies focused on during the unit, whose overarching theme was education. And my chosen topic and a question or prompt that targets abstract aspects of it is digital education in the future, the pros and cons. Okay, so let's look at the task cycle now. The first step would be to ask learners to brainstorm key content points individually, in pairs, or in groups. And it would be content points focused on this particular prompt: digital education in the future, the pros and cons. And then the second step would be to ask learners to consider and make notes on how they'll structure the content of their monologue, how the points can be supported and developed, how the points and subpoints can be linked, what vocabulary and grammar would be useful to communicate the message, and what strategies would support them in carrying out the task. So as you can see here, most of these elements directly relate to the abilities described in the descriptor there. Okay, and step 3 would be actually performing the task. So I'd ask learners to present their monologue using their notes to help them. And that could be to a partner, to a group, or to the whole class. And they would speak for 1 to 2 minutes. And learners can be motivated to listen through 2 tasks as a listener. The first being needing to ask a follow-up question, which replicates, natural interaction, and a peer feedback task. And that peer feedback task would be focused on success criteria, which is derived from the descriptor. So here's the success criteria. Was the description clear? Was it detailed? And was it expanded and supported by additional points and relevant examples? So in this particular case, what I would do is I tell the listener who's listening to the partner performing the task to listen, make notes in relation to this peer feedback, but also obviously listening so they can ask a question at the end of the talk. They ask a follow-up question, and then when that's done, they review their notes, take some time to do their peer assessment, and then give feedback. Now, there are different types of feedback forms you can use. I'll show you a few examples. So using that success criteria, here's a checklist style one where learners tick, and you can see things like okay, good, excellent, etc., and space to write comments and write the notes while they're listening. A variation of that is with smiley faces, if you like that, if you think that would work. Alternatively, here's a version which seems purely qualitative and doesn't force peers to commit to a particular level of achievement like okay, good, and so on, which might feel like a grade is being awarded, even though it's purely for developmental purposes. And here's another variation, which again seems to be purely qualitative and encourages learners to write and make comments on what went well and what could be improved in relation to the success criteria. Okay, so let's look at some challenges and solutions to introducing self and peer assessment. Um, so most of these key challenges and potential solutions apply to both self and peer assessment, so we can group them together for the most part. But the first one is more related to self-assessment. So a challenge for introducing self-assessment is that learners might lack metacognitive awareness or their ability to think about and evaluate their own learning process. So some students might struggle to accurately assess their own abilities. The solution for this would be to help students develop their self-reflection skills through guided self-assessment checklists and models. A challenge for both self and peer assessment is that some learners may rate themselves or their peers too high or too low. The solution for this would be to help learners understand and apply the success criteria to sample responses, and also to support them with guided self reflection and peer assessment activities. Another challenge is that there might be resistance to self and peer assessment. This is because some learners might not trust their own or their peers' ability to assess, or they might feel uncomfortable self or peer assessing. This is also more likely if self and peer assessment aren't common in the particular educational context. The solution would be to start with teacher led reflections before gradually transitioning to independent self assessment. Um, and also, you could explain the benefits. So, explain or show how self and peer assessment improves learning, autonomy, confidence, and so on. Another challenge is that some students might struggle to articulate strengths and areas for improvement effectively. The solution would be to teach useful language, provide sentence starters, guiding questions, structured self reflection and peer feedback templates, and examples of constructive feedback. And another challenge is that there might not be much time to integrate self and peer assessment into the language program, but it's simply worth the time investment. You'll reap the rewards later on down the line. So, my advice would be to gradually introduce self and peer assessment little by little from the beginning of the course. All right, so on to the conclusion now. So, in sum, um, aligning all elements of an education system to a standard like the CFR is crucial for the success of a program. Regular, ongoing formative assessment is essential to inform learning and teaching decisions towards achieving curriculum objectives. And integrating self and or peer assessment into a program has multiple benefits and challenges. Okay, so onto some resources now. So if you scan this QR code or copy that bit.ly link, maybe you want to take a photo of this slide, it will take you to a document with these resources and a few more. And the first few focus on formative assessment or assessment for learning, principles and activities. Those first two links there in the slide are particularly useful. There's also links on the Council of Europe's CEFR page, more in the document, all around helping you with understanding the CFR more. Again, the useful tool there, the self-assessment grid. The aligning language education with the CFR handbook is particularly useful if that's something you're interested in. And there's also some British Council publications like the Comprehensive Learning System, the British Council Equals Core Inventory for General English, as well as the last one there on how language assessment works. So I encourage you to have a look at the resources and to download them and see what would be useful for you. Okay, so I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to taking any questions.